Okay, good morning or good afternoon almost. We're going to start this session. We were waiting for the last speaker, which was with us, and I imagine will be here in a moment. So this session is on tools and indicators for understanding cities. Of course, the underlying point of discussion that we have is the relevance of data for the so-called smart cities. No? I mean, we hope that data will help us to make better decision-making, and as a consequence, better management for these cities. We'll hope that data will help to have more accountability and transparency and open possibilities for open data and all the innovation and entrepreneurship that can be associated with them. Data will help us in the benchmarking, in learning, sharing, ranking cities so that we can improve. And finally, of course, data is important for planning and opportunity sensing and for making reality the model of city that each one is desiring. So all these are the underlying issues that we have. I think we have an interesting panel that will cover from tools and instruments that can help to make this better use to the data, to issues related to the data itself, to the certification part of this data. Standardization, harmonization are important issues, and finally about rankings, indexes, and different ways of trying to compare cities. We are going to follow the order that is in the screen. I'll be doing a very, very short introduction to each one of them, but it's the turn to speak. Okay, so that just to start, let me give the work and the stand to Kiang. Chye is an IT team member at the leads an IT team, at the Urban Redevelopment Authority in Singapore, specializing in enterprise geospatial application for planning and citizen services. He has a bachelor degree in computer science. Okay, so the board is yours.
Hello. Hi, I'm Kiang from the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Singapore, or in short, the URA. URA is actually the Land Use Planning and Master Planning Authority of Singapore, where we cover the master planning of Singapore for work together with many other government agencies. Today I'll be sharing with you the use of our 3D digital urban model for our smart urban planning. Okay, Singapore is actually highly urbanized. We're densely populated, as you can see in the picture. We are rated with a high quality living environment in Asia and rest of the world. We are located in Southeast Asia. We have very limited land space, covering only about 710 square kilometers and house about 5.4 million population. So because of that, we embrace technology actively in order to deliver advanced applications to engage our citizens and our stakeholders. So in terms of engaging citizens and stakeholders, we look at three key aspects when we adopt technology. We try to leverage on mobile and social platforms and also keep abreast of the Internet of Things development. We depend heavily on real-time information and big data. And in terms of our delivery to the public, we adopt advanced applications such as simulation and 3D urban model, and we try to implement our solutions to, across platforms and such as smart devices. Singapore has a smart nation vision as well. It's citizen-centric with major stakeholders looking into different aspects of the citizens' well-being. So URA takes care of the city planning, while we have the Land Transport Authority taking care of urban mobility, Housing Development Board taking care of urban habitat, and so on and so forth. This vision is supported by the Smart Nation platform, which is underlying comprising of data exchange platform and also a very nationwide sensor network. And on the vertical, we are actually in line and in touch with the industry and also the research institutes and universities, so as to keep abreast of latest development and projects. So for our Smart Nation vision, URA has a Smart Nation integrated city planning strategy as well. For city planning, we look at the three key aspects. In terms of long-term planning, where we plan for the next 50 years, we have a process called the concept plan. This planning process maps out the broad land use in terms of key aspects such as economic, environment, and social. Following the long-term planning, we have the mid-term planning, where we call a master plan. This is the part where we plan for the next 15 years, and this is where we plan for detailed land use for the whole of Singapore. And for the short term, in the 2 to 5 years, we actually work very closely with stakeholders, and this is where we discuss local planning issues on a regular basis. So the integrated city planning framework we adopt is quite similar to many other nations. We depend heavily on good quality data. We try our best to actually acquire planning information, demographics, and we are progressing to get real-time information and also ground sensing information. And we share this data with our public and also our stakeholders. And following that, we develop our applications, advanced applications in terms of geospatial and 3D analysis, which I'll cover a bit more detail later. And in the longer term, we actually, in order to be sustainable, we work very closely with industry leaders and also research institutes. Our take on smart nations actually come in the form of a test bed. We have Jurong Lake District in the western part of Singapore. It's actually the largest commercial and regional center. We started the call for collaboration last year, and we recently awarded about 15 smart solutions, and involving about 20 companies. We will be looking into implementing projects in three key aspects, such as urban mobility, sensing awareness, and also sustainability. So I'll now proceed to touch on the details of our 3D urban model system. We set out to implement this 3D system with the objective to facilitate our core planning and urban design work. The system currently has about 150,000 massing models, of which 20,000 are high-quality models, and they cover street furniture, landscape, buildings, and road terrain. And they are very accurate. They are geo-referenced based on our local Survey 21 coordinate system. And in order to be interoperable, we have them available in a Collada format as well, which we use for data exchange. This is a brief view of where we have covered. Basically, the areas in blue are areas where we have completed the modeling, but areas in red are the ones that we are progressing to finish by the end of the next 2 years. So our design principle is as follows. We try to make our information interoperable by making them available through Collada, and we work with industry to ensure that the data format is supported in the various platforms, such as S3, Google, and Autodesk. This is an example of our completed projects for Punggol. Punggol Tree Lodge is actually a new housing town. 3D model proves to be very useful in terms of running analysis, such as use of natural lighting for common spaces. This is very well used by our sister agency, Housing Development Board. And this is another area in Singapore called Holland Village. Holland Village has a unique urban identity where its landscape is of utmost importance to the citizens. But we are continuously developing this area. So 3D system proved to be useful in marrying the needs for existing urban identity versus new developments that is coming up, so that we can assess the impacts of new development on our existing urban landscape. Something that we cannot do in conventional 2D, but 3D has allowed us to actually do more advanced impact analysis. The same goes for Orchard Road. Orchard Road actually is our key shopping belt in Singapore. Space is very important for the man on the street, where we want to actually allow them to have open spaces as they walk through the street. But continuously, we are also developing Orchard Road. So we have to ensure that the new developments, when implemented in the existing Orchard Road, be it facade changes or new buildings, has minimal impact to the man on the street. And this 3D system allows us to actually calculate and assess the impact of new developments when we walk on the street, so that they don't feel being closed up by the new developments. So in a nutshell, what we have for the 3D system can be categorized into three key aspects. We have capability to deliver interactive 3D visualization. We have ability to actually interface with geospatial applications, and also we can develop advanced urban analysis, such as parametric modeling. We will see some of the details in the video later on. To take it further, we have implemented and commissioned a 3D immersive review room in our URA building. This room is actually being used by URA to engage multiple stakeholders, particularly the Smart Nation Committee, to look at the broad plan we have for Singapore. We review the proposals from our committee and also from stakeholders for specific development applications. The setup comprised of a 100-inch curved screen with a 3 projector blended output. This allows us to actually look at the city planning from a very broad perspective and able to assess the impact of the plans and how we can tweak our policies and work with developer closely. And in the long run, Smart Nation applications can be enabled through this platform. Now let's have a look at the 3D digital urban model video. I think the audio is not working. So this is Orchard Road. I'll briefly run through using my verbal cues. As you can see, we actually modeled up Orchard Road, and this is Jurong Lake District, as I mentioned. Now we are doing a fly-through of the Jurong Lake District, looking at the new development that's coming up. And what we are seeing here is the use of the view shed analysis to allow our planner have a view of the vantage point. Urban design is important to us. So these two allow us to visualize the area from specific vantage points. And we use shadow analysis to ensure that there's sufficient shade from shadow casting. We don't want to overbuild with shelters, so shadow casting is a natural form of shade for our developments. Next, we will be looking at some of the urban simulations that we have developed using City Engine. We work closely with S3 to tweak the off-the-shelf product to be able to radically allow our planner to tweak the planning parameters very quickly on the fly, so that we can simulate changes quickly and assess the changes to the as-built environment, and also play around with our planning parameters in order to maximize the land use for the limited amount of space available. Another aspect is to use the 3D system, City Engine, to actually assess the traffic impact analysis for a new area. With the population and the building information, we can simulate the traffic flow very quickly. So that's a quick snapshot of what we have done for the existing system. In the longer run, our intent is to actually build advanced capability to actually allow us to visualize more information on the 3D system. As Singapore continues to urbanize, we have to visualize the connectivity and pedestrian flow for built-up areas. 3D system let us do that very easily, integrating geospatial and real-time information, as well as the existing building. And as you know, Singapore has limited land space. So what we will do is we need to explore other alternatives. Underground land use is something that we will explore. and to develop further. So the 3D system allows us to map out the available users and explore alternatives to see what are the users that we can develop for specific parts of Singapore. So I conclude my presentation to say that we will continue to use 3D as well as integrate with other forms of data to enable our planners work better for urban planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chye. Now is going to be the turn of Alexei Novikov. Alexei has more than 15 years of experience as senior manager at S&P and Thomson Reuters and as a consultant for international economic development organization, governments, and private firms. He has been a visiting professor and a research fellow in several Russian, British, and US universities. Alexei.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you all here. A very busy venue. The third day of the conference. Such a responsibility on the side of speakers to keep you away from this wonderful city. I represent a company called Habidatum. So we are developing an analytical framework for the so-called lean planning. And my colleague, Katya Sirova, was talking about lean planning and lean governance as a new tool to support flexible development of the city. We are building the platform that is dealing with spontaneous data. And here are my colleagues, Vadim Smartin and Eduard Hyman from the company called Matryoshka. And so we are doing this together. And these wonderful visualizations, this is their work. The spontaneous data is a very interesting thing because it's about time. It's about constant presence with the city. But the key thing here is not just monitoring of what's going on in the city and being with the city every time, because it doesn't make any sense unless you have any concept about time. So, but the key thing is to understand what kind of role time plays in our city and in our management. And this is what we are trying to understand. The point of my presentation is that the time is the most unused urban asset. So, and it's pretty strange because, well, it has been a fantastic discussion over decades. Started probably with Torsten Hägerstrand, one of the most prominent social geographer, Swedish geographer. And I hope this is going to be a kind of a tribute to him because he contributed a lot to our understanding of the city, time-space environment. But whatever it is, the theory is going on, but the practical use of time consideration in urban planning is pretty limited. The current trends are really striking, and probably now we should think really seriously about how we can use time in our planning processes. For example, in UK, and this is the study of Jeff Mulgan, a former advisor to Tony Blair, 30% of urban residents are time rich, and they declare themselves as time rich and cash rich. So they can use urban space in a pretty flexible way. They don't need to work, they don't need to travel to work every day. And this is a real challenge for the urban planners, and so, well, their time schedules are completely unpredictable. In France, only 12% of people's time is related to work, and this is the most recent study and one of the most interesting I read over the last year, coming from French real estate managers and specialists. Of course, well, the time to eat, to sleep, etc. is considered here. So, and also the time of being kid is considered here. But 12%, this is so little. And so actually the whole agenda of the city planning now is turning upside down because cities are no longer travel to work machines, right? But at the same time, we see, phenomenon like an urban sprawl, and the latest estimate are that only about $500 billion of US dollars are spent to manage the urban sprawl in the United States. And here is the thing. My point is that we treat time in a very narrow way. So we normally treat time as a barrier. We treat time not as an asset. We are trying to minimize time. We are trying to maximize speed. We actually stimulate urban sprawl, but we forget about time as a space to use, right? As a social experience, as an asset. And here is real dilemma, and I think that the current trend would be actually to think more about time as an asset rather as a time as a barrier. So we need to measure time. We need to be able to measure time, and we don't know how much time we use spaces within the city, buildings, commercial, private, etc. So our small project that we've done recently in Moscow with help of interns from Moscow State University, actually was about measuring time that city space is being used. So we have chosen 4 streets in the core Moscow, in the central Moscow, and surveyed each building and the distribution of functions in each building. Also trying to understand the schedules and the combination of schedules of all the functions that we observed. And we created diagrams and put this information on map, and you probably saw some of our findings on the stand. But the result is really fascinating because, what we see here is that approximately 40% of accessible space, 40% of time, the accessible space is not used, right? There is an accessible space, inaccessible space, blocked space, and it is about 20% in the city and in the area that we observed. And the rest, 40% of time is used and accessible. So the resource actually is enormous. 40% of the time, the city space is not in use. So what we are going to do about this? And can we do something about this? Does it mean that we have to use this and we can use it? No, of course not, because we have very strong limitations, and they probably is a part of a problem that we have been observing over the decades, and this is why time is not so widely and deeply considered in the management processes. First of all is zoning, secondly labor regulations, very strict, and of course market culture, habits, and that prevent us from using space at night, for example, etc. However, it is changing, and definitely we have to come up with some sort of agenda how to deal with this. First of all, I guess we have to find a way to measure time. So, and currently this is only kind of field surveys that give us some information. Secondly, we have to actually find a way to classify time, different types of time use. And thirdly, we have to find a way to coordinate schedules. And lean planning and lean governance is about coordination most of all. Not really planning, but coordination. Coordination between people and functions, between functions themselves. And this is where the most important resource is revealed by this kind of study. So at the end, I just would like to say that the key thing here would be not just to make the picture about time use more systematic, but be able to integrate it into the practical tool, and here what we do here is the Habidatum platform, which allows you to actually understand the time-space capacity of the place. It's a very old theory, but here is what you can do in practice. You can actually calculate the commercial capacity of the place by colliding data from debit and credit cards with the mobility data, and also you can add perception data and see how perception and real capacity use is changing over time within the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexei. Now is time for Masoud Ghandehari from the Center of Urban Science and Progress in NYU Polytechnic School of Engineering. Masoud is in the faculty of the New York University and head this center on the Urban Observatory at the Center of the for Urban Science and Progress. His research is focused on developing methodologies that generate multi-scale urban data on the physical, environmental, and human systems. Masoud?
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. And so I figured three things that I was asked to present. Just want to make sure I got the correct up and down. So I come from city of New York. I work at New York University, and I have a part-time appointment at this Center for Urban Science and Progress. And so when I was asked to provide three things that have some social impact that relates to cities, I figured that the easiest thing would be to present what this new center is about. How does the three elements of data, research, and education is designed to serve cities. So I will just go through this and start with actually what is the center all about and what is its structure. The Center of Urban Science and Progress is one of the few centers that succeeded the competition that Mayor Bloomberg launched approximately 3 years ago. And the center is essentially a convergence of big data and cities. It has to do with what does it take to use the growing trends in availability of data, the growing population in cities, and how do we create a framework by which we can serve data to serve cities. So the partnership of the Center for Urban Science and Progress, number one, has a number of universities, including my esteemed colleagues here at the panel, and a few other universities, some in New York City, some overseas, as you see listed, CUNY and IIT and work in Europe as well. There's also a healthy number of industry partners, and these are very engaged partners, ranging from Microsoft to IBM's, some number of utilities in the city, and a number of smaller companies. Then there is a number of national laboratories. The national laboratories are for the Department of Energy national laboratories, the Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, Sandia, and Brookhaven National Labs. And they bring a wealth of computation power and a wealth of instrumentation know-how. And finally, the city agencies. The city agencies, we have MOUs with approximately 11 New York City agencies on data sharing and data analytics. The center is established to serve the city. This is the primary charter of the Center for Urban Science and Progress. And we take that very seriously, and for that reason, we've chosen New York City to be the initial place for us to make an impact. As far as the research, well, observations and data collection is first and foremost on the research agenda. Further down, the capability to be able to acquire synoptic and persistent data is a hallmark of our data integration or data acquisition program. And by that we mean to be able to collect persistently everywhere. In order to gain a better understanding of the three elements, the constructed, the natural, and the human systems. And the reason the persistence and the synoptic aspect of it is there is that so it will enable better integration of understanding of the interfaces among these systems. Just to give you a little bit more insight into what we mean by data sources, to begin, it is all the agency data. Almost 1,100 data sets, 95% of them from New York City agencies. Some of them are open data, some of them are not. So it's really a wealth of data that needs to be dealt with. Not all of them are clean. Not all of them are usable. Then there's a wealth of street level data. These are, again, agency instruments on the street level. Almost 1,000 cameras. Almost 700 traffic monitors that acquire at every 2-second traffic flows. Range of air quality monitors, just really, really very, very wealthy data set on the ground level. And then finally, novel instrumentation. So there are the observatory that Ricard referred to earlier, which my role at the center is to head the observatory, with what is known as the CUSP Urban Observatory, is to not only to look into integrating street-level resources, but also establishing new methodologies for acquiring data. So these observation sites are observation sites that are on top of tall buildings in New York City for acquiring a range of information about the buildings, about occupancy, about climate, etc. So I'd just like to give one example of what such a research, as a single example, given for the interest of time, with social impact. In other words, something that is somewhat information about people. So what you're watching right now on the screen is a 24-hour time lapse of New York, one vantage point looking at Lower Manhattan. It's a 24-hour in 1 minute. So in other words, it's compressed. So what was done in this study. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues is an astronomer who studied stars in his past life, and he's now looking at city lights. And he did a very interesting study, and we worked on this for a while before we could wrap our head around it. And it was about sleep habits, about sleep-wake cycles. And the work that was done in this particular example was that he lined up the off cycles of the scene. Basically found the timing of the off cycles. I'm looking at the lower left corner. And it turned out that, yeah, there's definitely a pattern that, people start going to sleep at around 11 o'clock. Pretty much 80% of the people are asleep. And then pretty much everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody goes to sleep. And then if you went to the next day and kept the same pattern of pixels on the screen, on the image, there was no correlation. In other words, people are not creatures of habits. You may sleep in a certain time on a Monday, but on a Tuesday you may have a completely different pattern. However, and this was repeated over and over. I'm just showing examples. And then what was done is that we actually went through and lined up the cycles of the off cycles according to their actual off times. And it turned out that consistently it gave the exact same patterns. So in other words, people are not creatures of habit, but society is a creature of habit. Now, so now the next step is looking at effects of extreme events, effects of winter to summer, demographics. So there's a wealth of really, really interesting social information / health information that can be obtained with a relatively simple platform but novel approach. And so this is one example, and there's many, many examples that I can give if you're interested later on. So now I'd just like to move on to education. And so the center has been here for only 2 years. We're offering a 1-year advanced master's degree in urban informatics. And this is a compressed, so in other words, summers are also involved. We just graduated our first cohort. This cohort was 25 students. Admission rate was approximately 12%. So in other words, 12% of the applicants were selected, and they just graduated. Mayor Bloomberg, of course, attended because on his way out of office to inaugurate that class. The next, which is currently now in session, has grown to 66. The admission rate is approximately 15%. And a very, very interesting mix of backgrounds. So again, back to the kinds of people that can get engaged in cities. I mean, we had people, and we have people who studied art, people who studied psychology, computer scientists, engineers. And the interesting thing about it is that working together, they've really managed to create a very, very interesting cohort. And in terms of social impact, it's an interesting, very, very interesting group of people. And a lot of the students who come from international sites have been returning to their home sites to work for the agencies, working for the international bodies, United Nations, World Bank. A number of the students are actually city workers, and so there's a very, very tangible impact, I would say, on the city agencies. And so from a point of view of social impact, I believe that the growth of these city-centric research centers, there are a number of good centers. University of Toronto is doing some great work. University of Chicago is doing some great work. And there's a few others. So it really does seem like the century of cities is beginning to permeate the academia. And in this particular case, seems like the academia, in a way, is following the industry and the government. So with that point, I'll close off. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Masoud. Now it is the turn of 2 speakers that we are going to have in the next slot. We are going to have Senator R. Eggleton, served as the mayor of the city of Toronto for 11 years, the longest serving mayor in the city history. He was a member of the parliament and federal cabinet minister for over a decade, and he was named to the Senate in 2005, and is currently the chair of the World Council on City Data. And he will be joined in the presentation by Patricia McCarney. Patricia is a professor, president of the World Council on City Data and director of the Global Cities Institute at the University of Toronto. She developed the newly published International Standard for Sustainable Cities, the ISO 37120, the first ISO standard for cities, which is hosted at the WCCT, so the World Council on City Data. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. If we can get the slide presentation up here. There we go. Why cities, why metrics? Well, I think we all know, certainly this audience would well know why cities. There is rapid urbanization going on in our world, let's see. Okay. I think we're getting there. Nope.
You have to use this one to move forward.
Yep.
And if
Yeah,
not,
I did.
if not, just
Okay.
use the arrow here.
Okay.
That will work, I'm sure.
There we go. Here's the demonstration of how urbanized our world is becoming. The statistics show that cities are indeed the economic drivers in our respective countries. They are centers of innovation, centers of culture, centers of advanced education. And you can see big numbers coming about in terms of the GDP. The scale of demand and scale of investment is affected by that growth. We're at a very pivotal moment for cities, with the global population increasing by some 2 billion, reaching close to 5 billion by 2030. And this translates into a great deal of investment that is needed in our infrastructure. We're already experiencing backlogs in dealing with infrastructure in many different cities. To that, we have to add infrastructure for the expanding populations. And it's estimated some $57 trillion is going to be needed over the next few decades in this regard. So no doubt, cities will need to be smarter. Why cities use data? Well, quite simply, to benchmark and measure results from the investments, develop quantitative targets and goals and master plans. And in short, it's the old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, I think is very true in this context. City leaders worldwide also want to know how they're doing relevant to their peers. Now, back in the 80s when I was mayor of Toronto, I would visit a number of cities and I'd have mayors visit me, and I'd learn about some of the things they're doing. Every city likes to talk about their successes, their best practices and such. And I said, well, that's really interesting stuff. But then when it came down to trying to see how it might be applicable, how we could learn from it, it was very difficult to have the comparison because the data you couldn't compare. And right now, what we are getting with this new ISO standard is real data by cities, for cities, and that's something I could have certainly have used back then. Comparative analysis and knowledge sharing is vital in this rapid urbanization. Now, there's still challenges. As we have now developed a base, there's still a lot of challenges that have to be met. Boundaries, for example, of cities. There's no conformity here. We have metropolitan areas, we have small cities, large cities, all sorts of configurations. And some city data is, of course, often collected nationally through census means, not locally. There's no there hasn't been till now, no standardized definitions on what to measure, no standardized methodologies and how to measure it. Quite simply, you can't compare if you don't have some kind of common methodology in how you're providing that data. Weak or non-existent baseline data in cities, and until now, no mechanism for data and knowledge sharing across cities. And just to illustrate this issue of the boundaries, you can see that some of the cities that are particularly large in and of their own self are not necessarily the largest when it comes to metropolitan areas, so that here again, you have challenges with respect to those boundaries. Now, building standardized data for cities, we started a few years ago in the Global City Indicators facility out of the University of Toronto in a pilot project that was sponsored by the World Bank. There were some 9 cities, and out of those cities, 1,100 indicators were looked at, but only 2 were comparable. Imagine that, only 2 out of 1,100. It means that there had to be a lot of work done. So we set about to try to do that. We got the number of cities you see here and some 82 countries involved with the Global City Indicators facility as we started to standardize the methodology. We put together a number of policy snapshots on things like prosperity, aging, sustainable infrastructure. Just one statistic that came out of the aging report. I hope your city is in the upper part of the chart there. And we also have been developing it as a framework for age-friendly city policy planning and design, as you can see outlined here. Another one of the projects that we've undertaken is through GCIF is a project in partnership with UNICEF on an urban child development index. We set the dimensions and the sub-indexes, as you can see, all using the standardized indicators that we had developed. And there's a number of pilot cities that are part of that project with UNICEF and GCIF. And additional indices under development, competitiveness, mobility, as you see here. There is a good base now, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Well, that brings me to this slide. This is where we took our work on the standardization we were building for the metrics. We took it to ISO and we said, look, we think this is something you should. They hadn't done cities up until now. They do light bulbs, computers, and whatnot, ISO standards. You've heard of a lot of them, I'm sure. But here was a case where we said, you should be doing cities, and cities is something that is now done and has produced ISO 37120. And the person who helped to lead that project for the GCIF team and is now, along with myself and our team, a part of the World Council on City Data is Patricia McCarney, so I'll turn it over to her.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much. As Senator Eggleton just mentioned, we've moved through the Global City Indicators facility and the Global Cities Institute and have begun this process in taking the standard forward to ISO. I'm very pleased to say that ISO 37120, which I'll talk to you about now in my 4.5 minutes, I'll say a little bit about ISO 37120 and the formation of the World Council on City Data that now hosts ISO 37120. So building the standard, as Senator Eggleton mentioned, we moved in 2012 to Geneva to talk to ISO about building this standard. We are now sitting within the TC 268, a technical committee of ISO, working on sustainable development of communities. The working group 2 at the bottom on city indicators is the one I convene, where we've been developing the draft standard for publication. There are 20 countries represented in our TC. Many of your cities are on the MIR committees of these national governments, working with us to develop this standard. So it was published in May 2014. It was very fast. It normally takes 6 years to build a standard at ISO, but we were given the benefit of having worked for 6 years building it and testing it with 255 cities globally. ISO, in their wisdom, said it wouldn't have to take us 6 years. We'd already done the heavy lifting before we came into Geneva. So we are now very happy to say it's been published after 2 years of quite strenuous effort to get there. So the users of the standard are especially city leaders. It was city leaders who built the standard with us over the last 6 years, so city managers, CIOs, mayors, planners, and other public works officials in all of the cities globally that participated. ISO, the standard has 100 indicators that are now standardized definitions, standardized methodologies for cities to report on 100 indicators, 46 of which are core. So for certification under ISO, the 46 are the minimum. The 100 indicators span 17 themes, and these themes were prioritized by cities during the process of building them. So the 100 indicators are really based around performance management and quality of life, the key things that city managers and city leaders are very concerned about. So 20 countries participated. It went through a couple of international ballots, 5 drafts, 300 comments. During this period of the commentary, we received extremely large demand for new indicators, especially around natural disasters and resilience, and how cities can better be prepared and have earlier response times for example, tsunamis, ice storms. This is our street in Toronto. We had a terrible ice storm which really debilitated the city for about 6 days. And of course, cities like New York with Hurricane Sandy. So the indicators that were being demanded during this process really were a different level of resilience indicators. So we now have a Dropbox that the 20 participating countries with the MIR committees containing, I think, probably hundreds of cities now participating, have been putting indicators into our Dropbox at ISO. We have 900 indicators now in the Dropbox asking for new indicators to be built at ISO under my working group on resilience. As a result of that, we're now building 37121. ISO has already assigned the number in the hopes that we can also move this one quite quickly, since this one is in such high demand by city leaders. The second part of my presentation, I just want to talk to you about the next step since the publication. So we formed the World Council on City Data, which is a not-for-profit organization outside of the University of Toronto, which is now the host for certifying cities. We invited 20 foundation cities to join us to help to test and create the certification protocol. Since May, we've been undertaking this effort. And we are happy to say that the 20 cities that joined us for this effort have now all, as of Monday and Tuesday in London, we were just at London City Hall with our 20 foundation cities gathering for the first cities to be certified under ISO 37120, the first standard ever on city indicators. So it was a celebration in London. Our cities include quite a good geographic representation. So Boston and Toronto are representing North America. Our European cities include London, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Helsinki, and Rotterdam. From Asia Pacific, Makati in the Philippines, Haiphong, Vietnam, Shanghai, of course you know. Latin America, Bogota, Buenos Aires, Guadalajara, and Sao Paulo. I know that some of our cities are actually with us today here in the room. West Asia, Amman, Dubai, and Mecca, the holy city of Mecca, Saudi Arabia. In Africa, Johannesburg, Mina, Nigeria, which is one of the smaller cities, and Melbourne. And I'm very, very pleased that the Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne is with us, as well as the Chief Planner from Buenos Aires, who was one of the candidates for an award last night. And I know our Chief Information Officer for Toronto is also with us, and I believe Helsinki's here. So we have a number of our partners here in the room in the Foundation City mix, and so the geographic representation has been quite strong. We launched also in London. We had the meeting on Monday, Tuesday. We also launched the WCCD web portal. That's now being, I should say, tested, but really it's being played with by our member cities, the first foundation cities. These cities are able now to go in with standardized data and say, how are we doing on any one of these 100 indicators? So the number of automobiles, for example, it takes 1 second and the graph appears showing exactly how each city's doing relative to the others. And, more complicated XY axis and a third dimension on the right. And you can also go in and look at all across the 17 themes and just pull up all kinds of indicators in parallel by a selected set of peer cities and then graph it. Greenhouse gases, for example. The functionality has also been built into the website now so that you can actually, as we go through the process over the next 5 years, we can start to build trend analysis. I have a short 1.5-minute video which I'd like to bring on now, if that's possible. And if it works, we'll watch it. If not, we'll continue. Shall I try to put it on myself, or are you putting it on at the back? If not, we'll just continue. So much for all the testing. Sorry. I think I'll just continue. I'm not touching. I know it is not coming on now. I don't want to keep waiting. I think I'll just go ahead. You can put it on at the end if you're able to pull it up. Okay, let me continue then. So our next steps. Oh.
The world is changing at light speed. Cities are growing and evolving, searching for innovative, intelligent ideas and alternative futures that determine the path forward in urban centers. Diverse cultures, geographies, and economies, with only one common language: data. What if we could find a comprehensive way to compare these diverse cities, with a truly consistent platform for standard urban metrics, so that cities could share knowledge, guide smart and sustainable development and learning, measuring performance to vastly improve quality of life? This is the call of the World Council on City Data and ISO 37120, the first ever international standard for cities. We're at the epicenter of a worldwide effort to standardize urban metrics, a global hub for creative learning partnerships across cities, international organizations, corporate partners, and academia. Rural life is giving way to urban development. Cities are planning for resilience and for changing climates, learning from each other. Together, we're delivering the essential tools cities, business leaders, planners, designers, and professionals need to build more livable, sustainable, and prosperous urban centers, to foster innovation, to provide a clear method for defining and determining indicators that can help measure performance in a universal language, to drive sustainability, quality of life, and investment in cities worldwide. The World Council on City Data, created by cities, for cities.
Thank you. Thanks. So our next steps, and I think I have 10 seconds or 5 seconds counting down. So the next steps are, we now have close to 100 cities now signed on to, as we open it up on Monday when I get home to Toronto, another 100 cities are coming on board to be certified against ISO 37120. So the website will only grow to include many more cities over time. And we're working with our foundation partners going forward. And we had the meeting in London City Hall and launched the book and the film and the web portal, which will be open to the public, by the way, around December 1st. So thank you very much. We have the book pages that look like this to celebrate the data for the first time being comparable across cities. Thank you very much. And there's also sign-up forms here in the room if anyone's interested in joining us.
Working? Yeah, now. Okay, last but not least, we have Professor Boyd Commoning from the Universidad del Desarrollo. He's the Director of Innovation and Professor on Smart Cities. As an urban and climate strategist, Boyd helps to lead community cities and companies in the journey towards the low-carbon economy. He created the Smart Cities Wheel as the framework for developing and implementing smart city strategies and for benchmarking cities around the globe.
Thank you. I took all my slides of urban food systems out, knowing this is bordering on lunch, so hopefully we don't lose more people before lunch. I'll try to be fast in less than 12 minutes. Jean-Enrique asked if we could give some academic sort of foundation for the research we're working on in this space. And so here's one slide that summarizes a lot of my current and future research. I have 13 active research projects that usually intersect somewhere around all three of these things, which is sustainability, cities, and of course innovation and entrepreneurship, which is my core discipline. Right in the middle is all of my smart cities research. Since coming to the Expo, I've already come up with at least 2 more research projects I want to work on, so I need to duplicate myself, I think. So a lot of people have asked me about the Smart Cities Wheel and sort of where it came from. That's a framework I developed, which I'll show you in a second. But it actually came from somewhere. It came from me studying what was happening around the smart cities and sustainable city space around the world. I started this research in 2011 to try to understand what smart cities actually were, because at that time I was hearing things like they are innovative cities, they are high-tech cities, they are entrepreneurial cities, they are sustainable cities, they are participatory cities, and a little bit of everything in between. And so no one had the same definition, and if you don't have a definition, you can't really build a movement, in my opinion. And I decided, given the space we're in, that moving towards more of a graphical definition might actually help move the field along. And these were some of the resources I used as input. The research that was done out of Vienna and through collaboration to rank small and medium-sized cities in Europe around smart cities was a very big help for me. Also, surprisingly, maybe a small city happens to be just to the north of here in Barcelona, is Sant Cugat. Had a very interesting, innovative smart cities plan early on. So I used all these inputs, and then that came up with the Smart Cities Wheel, which probably some of you have seen before. I published it numerous times in Fast Company and other places. And it has 6 key aspects of what makes a city smart around environment, people, government, mobility, the things that we all know about. But to try to make it more intuitive and for use with citizens engagement, I designed it in the way of a wheel. I call it the Smart Cities Wheel. And so each component, like smart mobility, has 3 subcomponents. But of course, that leads to 6 components and 18 subcomponents. But then you got to measure all this stuff. So I started working on an indicator project myself. This was before the ISO project came out. And initially, I worked with the city of Buenos Aires, and we collected 400 potential indicators. We realized very quickly that that was completely impossible for an average city to use. So we started whittling it down. Over the last couple of years, I used 28 indicators. I used a combination of publicly available data as well as private data collected directly from the cities. And I was ranking cities in different regions around the world using this model. I'm very happy to say the model has been implemented and utilized around the world. It's now in Spanish, of course. It's in Dutch, Swedish, and here's in Hebrew as an example. I didn't do that work. Other people have done it to use the tool themselves. This is an example of a ranking that came out of my methodology from last year. That is another graphic I did not do, but media in Uruguay used it because I rated 8 cities in Latin America using my model, and Montevideo came out in the top 8, so they did this nice work on graphic illustration of the results of the analysis. So in 2014, I wanted to go back to the drawing board a little bit and decided to rely on a network I have of international experts in smart cities to see if we could actually come to some sort of agreement on what should the indicators be, because 28 was not enough and it wasn't all the right indicators. So Pilar Conesa, probably a lot of you know, she's the director of the Expo. Rick Robinson is the chief architect for smart cities for IBM based in the UK. Jesse, who's the founder of Smart Cities Council, and Esteve Amaral, a good friend of mine and colleague at ISADE here in Barcelona. And so we went from 28 to 62 indicators. I don't expect you to try to read these. Actually, these indicators are available. It's sort of a commons approach, so they're available. Actually, if you go to Smart Cities Council website, the list of the 62 indicators are available. I also have them in Spanish if you're interested. But one thing that's interesting here, following off the last presentation, is as I was redoing the indicators this year, I looked at the ISO standard, which had just emerged, And I changed and adapted some of the indicators. So 16 of the 62 indicators are exactly the same as the ISO indicator. Exactly. In fact, the number of the indicator is listed in my indicator set. And the idea there was to create synergies between the two, but recognize that their set is primarily focused on promoting sustainable measurement of cities, and mine was on smart cities, for which I believe sustainability is a key component, but not the only thing. But there's problems. Some of you are probably going to be pretty disappointed with me because you might have come here to see the unveiling of the 2014 rankings, which I promised people I was going to do today. I am, but the 62 indicators were very difficult for cities to obtain. Even the leading cities in the world were having a hard time with this, including Barcelona and Copenhagen and Helsinki. I interacted with all of them and many others. And so there are problems with the data. I'm in an experimental phase here still with a new set of indicators. So one was a failure of cities to actually be able to respond. So I sent the survey to 120 cities around the world, 30 cities in 4 different regions. I only got 11 responses. I interacted with many other cities and said, look, Boyd, we're having trouble with this. But in the end, only 11 were able to send relatively complete surveys. But even there's real problems. This is just a snapshot of one of my sets of analysis, which is around smart buildings. And one example that shows why this is difficult is I asked cities to report on how many certified green buildings they have. Trying not to be too Anglo-Saxon with my model, I wasn't going to say how many LEED certified only do you have, because that's more of a North American thing, which has spread to some cities. So I said, LEED, BREEAM, or if you're certified in something else, let me know. So, for example, Singapore had over 2,000 certified green buildings. Obviously, Singapore is very committed to a sustainable infrastructure, as we heard. But Copenhagen, which has one of the most ambitious sustainability plans of any city on the planet, said they had 6 certified buildings and 2 certified districts. I didn't even know how to measure the district as far as number of buildings, so I put it as 8 to start, which of course is a big problem. But also, if you think about it, Copenhagen has a very high minimum green building standard that all buildings have to meet. In fact, by 2020 or 2025, all new buildings in Copenhagen have to be built to net zero energy consumption. So it's very difficult. Obviously, I might be able to use a different type of indicator to get a proxy for how efficient the buildings are in the city, but this gives you an example of some of the problems. Another one was actually the Smart Cities Council recommended we start capturing data around things like building automation systems that are prevalent in the city infrastructure or commercial buildings. Of all the cities, Helsinki was the only one who reported any meaningful activity in this area, and they had 70% of the buildings have a city automation system. But how do you compare one city compared to the rest that don't have it? So a lot of problems with the data right now. This is the result of this sort of iteration of the ranking work. So I had these 11 cities participate this year. I'm really proud of the ones that did because they literally dedicated a lot of staff time and resources to do it. I treat this as an experiment where actually one of the things I've done with this is offer to each city to transparently share the raw data from each of the other participating cities with each other. So that's already happened, so there's some sharing happening between those cities. I ended up grouping, because of the data issues here, I grouped the cities in 3 categories: pioneering, emerging, and sort of next stage, so they're getting started. Nothing here is very surprising to you, I'm sure. And finally, the results of this analysis are reported today in Fast Company. So if you go online to Fast Coexist, you'll find the results. Those leading pioneering cities, I decided to do one more thing with my summary of the research, which was give them one suggestion for areas that they could improve on going forward into the future years. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Boyd. So we have, just a few minutes. In fact, we started a little bit late, but I know you all want to go for lunch. So let's see if there are questions from the floor. There are some microphones. there should be some microphones. Okay. Yes,
Hi.
go ahead.
Hi, I'm Zoltán Pósa. I'm from Hungary, and I'm interested how to join this kind of ISO type of group, and that's probably an easy answer. The better answer is, why is it good for us? Because now I see there are 5 different types of, we call it ISO, we call it a different name.
Yes, so
It will work. I don't think you have to do
it
anything.
will work?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your question. So as I mentioned, the first 20 foundation cities, we've created the certification protocol for ISO 37120. We launched in London on Monday and Tuesday, so the first 20 have now been certified. All of the cities I put up have all been certified. So now we open it to all cities globally. We already have close to 100 signed up to start Monday, so we would welcome your joining from any cities in Hungary. We have an expression of interest. It's online, but we also have it here in the room if you're interested. Once you sign the expression of interest, then we begin the process of asking and questions, and you're providing profile indicators, and we work out the agreement for certification. Once you submit the certification, the data for certification through the web portal, it's all now built, the functionality. Then your cities would start to have a certification review by external third-party verifiers, which are now on board with us at the council. And there'll be some back and forth. The 46 are core, so once you report on 46, that's already a bronze certification, all the way up to platinum certification, closer to 100. That certification process typically can take 2 weeks in the case of Boston, 2 weeks in the case of London. It took a couple of our other cities a little longer to get to the bronze, but now they're moving up to gold and platinum as we speak. They're trying to get more indicators in for certification. So it's a process that starts with this expression of interest. You're welcome to talk to us after.
Okay, do we have other questions from the floor? Let me see, I have problem seeing with this light in front of me. Okay, well, while you are thinking, I would like to bring, you know, we had in the presentation some idea about, you know, the opportunities that using the data, and we had some examples from you know, Singapore, Moscow, and New York about things that one can do with the data. I'd like you to comment something a little bit related to the last question and the comments of Boyd about the barriers that you find, you know, in getting this data from the cities, or, you know, the difficulties that because at the end, smart cities, a lot had to do with, you know, smart use of the data. But is the data reliable? Is ISO 10 is ready? You know, what are the barriers that you guys are finding, and what is your advice to the cities to overcome these barriers? Who wants to start?
So there is data quality, as you mentioned, data availability, as you mentioned. There are issues of privacy and confidentiality, as you mentioned. And I think then the technology of crunching is a whole different question. And our experience has been that privacy and confidentiality seems to be one of the obstacles, not only for the industry, but also for the government agencies.
So some of the challenges we confronted in those early days in 2008 to 2010, in the early days of starting to build the standard, we found that it was very important that cities drive what were their priorities. So the question we asked way back then was, what data are you already gathering as a city? That obviously means it's a priority area. And the reason we got so much traction so quickly to get 255 cities reporting was because it was data that was already being gathered by cities. It just wasn't being gathered the same. We had to tweak numerators and denominators and methodologies. So we went from 9 pilots to 255 so quickly because it was data that city managers and mayors were already interested in, and city planners. So that's one part of it. It came It came from that experience, and I know your struggles because I was thinking of you as you spoke. The data is very hard. If you look at what cities are already gathering, that's a good starting point. And then in our case at ISO, we're also now responding to what cities are asking for in terms of these resilience indicators. So cities are demanding it, they're going to report it, right? And they need it. If it's data that's necessary, it's necessary and needed in their priorities for better performance, better investment, better planning, better projection. Those are the reasons that cities report. So in fact, London joined us because it's an open data platform now. So London wanted to be part of a global open data platform so cities can start to talk to each other. So, London reported and became we gave them the platinum certification on Monday night in London. And they have the platinum certification because they want it to be part of a global network of cities that can talk to each other. So we convened a conversation that cities can actually converse on things that they're setting as priorities. We can't do that sitting in Toronto. It's been driven by cities.
I think that, of course, you have a lot of obstacles to obtain data. We are working with spontaneous data, and most of data is proprietary, so belonging to telecoms or companies like MasterCard, Visa, banks, etc. So, this is really difficult to get an access to this data, and of course, this is a problem. But we know how to do this. We know all the legal. We do all the legal paperwork, etc., etc. But the most striking and the most difficult issue is not actually the access to the data. It's an analytical demand for the data, because the modern city is a convention. It is a convention of jurisdictions. It is a convention of people, businesses, etc. And it's situational more than something that you have to describe, right? So you have to work with the city online. You have to work with the city being at constant presence or doing retrospective analysis, forecasting, etc. And conventions, they are fluid. And so you have to find some way to create an analytical demand to construct indicators. And only after that you can get real data, because otherwise you just are getting records, the kind of a garbage information that can be used but cannot be used. And the analytical demand, the structured analytical demand, this is the main barrier that we have to actually tackle.
Yes, you have a microphone over there, Hal. Sorry.
Another challenge is, and I mentioned this in my presentation, the boundaries of cities. Because cities as an economic entity are beyond the boundaries, in most cases, of their municipal governance. So you have metropolitan areas. So how do you get data on the basis of a metropolitan or a city region? These can be very key factors as well. We're doing a pilot project in Toronto where we have the city of Toronto, but the Greater Toronto area is about 25 municipalities. So we're bringing it together in an aggregation of the information of the data. We could have metropolitan governments join as well as city governments, or we could do aggregation in a city region. That's a challenge that's ahead of us, but it's one that we're already undertaking.
Okay. Is there any other question? No, well, I think we'll have to go for lunch, which is already time for it. So thank you very much for helping us to try to understand, opportunities, barriers, and challenge that we have with data. But let's all remember that without good data, there is no smart city. So we better keep working on this dimension. Thank you very much.